Hello, everybody.
Be the camera guy.
My name's Jim Chung, and I'm the Associate VP for Innovation and Entrepreneurship here at GW. I'm very happy to welcome you to I think this might be our 4th annual Startup Career Fair. We have a great set of companies next door. We have 37 startups with a number of different, actually representing hundreds of opportunities for you students there. Internships and real jobs and just really cool stuff. One thing that's really cool about startups that might be different from some of the other companies you're looking at is that when you're going to a startup as an intern, you're not just getting coffee and doing Xeroxes for some kind of program. You're actually getting to do really cool things that make a difference to the organization you're working with. So that's one of the reasons why we think that startup opportunities and internships are just a really cool way for students to go as they're looking at different career options. So I hear a lot about how difficult it is to find a job nowadays. In our database, we have over 600 startups in the DC area, all of them looking to hire students, and there are lots of opportunities. And we were only able to fit in 37 next door, but there are lots of opportunities. Sign up for our newsletter, and we have new stuff coming in there every week. We've got a great panel for you today. To you, you're all here because of our panel here. They are also, as understand, hiring a lot as well, and they love GW students. So make sure that you guys grab Chip in the panel afterwards. I'm going to introduce Lex McCusker, who's our Director of Student Entrepreneurship, who will be the moderator, and he will introduce the panel too.
Thank you, Jim. Well, welcome, everybody. Glad you're here. If you haven't already, please grab a box lunch. We want to make sure you're well fed as well as well educated. So I have the privilege of introducing the leadership from 2U. 2U is a company that was founded in 2008. From my perspective, and I have a few years on most of you, I can remember many iterations of the promise that computer-based education and later online education would actually supplant the traditional classroom. And from my perspective, 2U is the company that has finally fulfilled that promise. They provide a technology platform that allows educational institutions to provide distance learning, remote education, in a way that's actually better than the face-to-face equivalent. And that's a major milestone. The company was founded in 2008. They raised money originally, a couple $1 million in 2009, have been through several rounds of fundraising, and raised, by my calculation, over $100 million since. In 2014, they went public and raised another. You guys will correct me for all the things I get wrong, but I calculate about $120 million in that IPO round. I looked at their market cap yesterday. It was over $1 billion. Those of you who are fans of Silicon Valley will recognize that as tres comas. Right? That's my one joke for the whole day.
That was good.
It's good. Not good.
Also, senior deep.
All right. So let me introduce. Let's start by introducing Chip. Chip is the co-founder of 2U. He has won. Ernst & Young labeled him the Young Entrepreneur of the Year in 2012.
Actually, I don't think that was Young Entrepreneur of the Year.
Young?
Just to be clear.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, middle-aged.
So the kind of gracefully aging Entrepreneur of the Year. Goldman Sachs said he was one of the 100 most intriguing entrepreneurs in 2013.
Sure. Super intriguing.
That's true. Yeah. And also, he's been several years one of the highest rated CEOs at Glassdoor. So Chip is a 1992 graduate of GW with a degree in political communications. He has spent many years toiling in the vineyards of education, including being co-CEO of Cerebellum, who produced the standard deviations programs that you may be familiar with. Also as a CEO of a company called Smartville. You might know them for their Hooked on Phonics programs. He also took some time off to run the election campaign for Senator Barbara Mikulski. I guess he finally put that political communications degree to work.
Yeah, that's about the only place
at some time, right?
Was relevant.
So let me also introduce next Todd Glassman. is the general counsel of 2U, also a 1992 graduate of the School of Business with a BBA, and then a JD from Temple University. He practiced law in Philadelphia for 15 years and then joined 2U as general counsel in 2012. Yeah. Next, Mark Mashaw, 92 graduate of George Washington University. Do you see the pattern here? Yeah. With a BA in history. Mark is the EVP for marketing. He joined in 2012, joined 2U, but he also worked at Smartville and at Civic Entertainment Group before joining 2U. And then fourth is Jason Zocks, 92, another BBA graduate. He's a regional executive vice president. He has an MBA from Wisconsin and joined in 2008, so was there from the beginning. So, in terms of I want to do something a little bit chronological. So I want to go back to the good old days, back to yesteryear, and maybe a little stroll down memory lane. I want to ask each of the guys to talk about their first impressions of GW, coming here as freshmen in 1998. And by way of context, I had to go back to kind of get set for 1998. In November of 2098, there was a presidential election. 88, excuse me, sorry, thank you. 88, George Herbert Walker Bush 41, gets elected president in November. In that year also, earlier in that year, February, Super Bowl 22 was won by the Washington Redskins. Hard to imagine such a time, huh? Such a place. So let me ask each of you in turn. Tell me how you chose GW. What did you get when you got here? What did you find when you got here? And then how did you meet? Mark, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So as a kid, I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and then in Denver, Colorado. For one brief year between those two, I lived in Reston when I was in third grade, and I remember telling my parents when we'd come down to D.C., I was like, I want to go to school at GW when I go to college. I totally forgot that until it came time to apply. Was very interested in government when I thought about applying to school. Was very interested in coming back to the East Coast from Denver, and so GW was a natural fit. My folks reminded me of my third grade wish, so coincidence there. And was super excited to make for what for me at the time was a huge transition. Leaving home, going across the country, and arriving here with these fellows.
Well, I mean, just to give you the clarity, so these are three of my oldest friends, and so the fact that GW is woven throughout the entire story of 2U, you'll hear a lot about that as we talk, but truly, literally, these are three of my oldest and best friends, and they happen to be three senior executives at the company now, which is pretty cool. So there are moments every once in a while where we sit around and look at each other and realize actually what's happening, and those moments are honestly pretty precious. But they met at Colonial, what was called SARP. I'm just trying to level set. So they met at SARP.
Summer Advanced Registration Program.
Yes.
CI.
So now it's called CI. And I lived next door to Mark in Thurston. Todd lived one floor above us. I then pledged Sigma Chi and met this guy pledging. And we've all known each other since. So this goes all the way back. And just what's also kind of funny is we're all now old and married and have kids. And I met my wife in sophomore year. So she lived in Mitchell when I lived in Madison, and we're still together. This was our 20th anniversary this year. So my wife has known these guys longer than their wives have known them. So we go all the way back, and it's a great part of, before we start propping up 2U and talking about 2U, GW is a pretty remarkable place, and I think the tentacles that GW provides out into life in a bunch of fascinating ways is really remarkable. It's the great power of a really high-quality education. It's not just what you learn, but it's the people that you meet, the network you form, and the number of ways that will impact your life over time, I think, is one of the great special things about it. So a little bit on me, first-generation college graduate. I grew up in South Florida. When I got here, I had never seen snow, and I bought my first winter coat of my life with this guy at Hex, which isn't there anymore, but it was a department store downtown, and literally saw snow with these characters for the first time in my life. Got here and thought I had all the money in the world because I'd saved $800 delivering Mexican food, and I blew it in, 5 days at a bar called Mr. Henry's. So had a big culture shock for me. Growing up, got here, thought I had all the money in the world, and realized very quickly that I didn't, and had to work my way through GW, but really wouldn't trade it for the world. The experience was entirely life-changing on every level.
I actually
And
did.
he's loud. We always give him grief for being so loud. So he doesn't really need the mic.
But there he does.
I didn't believe that Chip only had $800 in the account. I was like, oh, it's fine. I'm sure, it's fine. And there really was only 800 in the account, and it was fine. I think that the people that my biggest GW thing, which Chip touched on a lot, is the people that I met. I mean, we met literally the first day of school, and as Chip said, Mark and I met before the first day of school. And then Chip met Jay-Z when they were pledging, and I distinctly remember him saying, oh, I met this guy, Jay-Z, you're going to really like him, you guys are so similar. And then we met right after that and became as good of friends as though we'd all met the first day. And it's been like that. And for me, GW is the people that I met. And Chip said that there are other strands woven through. There's so many other people in our lives, in our business. If you looked at our fantasy football league, all 14 of us went to GW together within 3 years, and most of us were in the same fraternity or roommates or something. My nephew is a junior at GW, and I tell him the tools that everybody has now to stay in touch with people that you know from school, they're vast. And I used to call these guys, and actually I would talk to their parents because someone answered the phone, and you had to find them, and with Facebook and LinkedIn and email and texting and everything else, the ability to stay connected to people that you're close with is fantastic. And we didn't have all that then. We just had landlines. There weren't even cell phones then. So that to me is a great thing that you have to keep all your connections that are important to you.
For those doing the math, that's 28 years that we've all known each other. So you kind of think about that. That if you think about what does GW mean and what was impressive, day one is obviously the people that you meet, because now 28 years later we're still that close, and not just professionally but obviously personally. We've all been at each other's weddings, et cetera, et cetera. Our kids play with each other, so that's a big part of what happens when you come to school. And I think the other part, when you think about the first couple of days, is there is that sort of culture shock of coming from this insular way that you grew up in the small-ish town or what you knew to coming to a place like GW. We have people from all over the country and all over the world now, more international now than it was when we were in school. But the moment that hit me, because you mentioned sports a second ago, is it was 1988, and I was a huge New York Mets fan coming from New Jersey, and the Mets had just won the pennant. It was on the 5th page of the Post. The front page was the Washington Redskins training camp has started. So it was like this, so right away, in just a way that level set for me was sports was so important, you knew you were someplace different. And that sort of sink in and it expanded over the, over the next 4 years.
Fantastic. All right, take another minute now and tell us about those 4 years at GW, and if you would focus as much as you can on the entrepreneurship climate. What was it like for students who had an entrepreneurship bug? How did you get it? Did GW help or hinder your entrepreneurship aspirations at that time?
Yeah, I don't know if I can speak for the entrepreneurship bent as much, but given the proximity in town, just the ability to work at really interesting places, whether it's a nonprofit or a think tank or a law firm or on the Hill or for a government agency, certainly, I worked, I know Chip worked, and so many of our friends had a job or had an internship that everybody was doing something. And I think that's obviously probably a reason why a lot of folks came here. But certainly, you have that culture while you're in school, you're always doing something else. And that's and we'll talk about this later, but that's the thing that I love about the interns that we get and the recent graduates that they get is, yes, they're fresh graduates, but they've been doing something interesting in theory, for several years. And it's a huge advantage. And, for me, it was great to take advantage of.
Sure.
There's no doubt that the work that you're able to do in the district, take advantage of it. Just to plug us a little bit, so right over there in the corner is Shana. Will you raise your hand, Shana? So Shana runs our intern program, which we call the two-turn program. And it's a great program. How many interns right now, Shana? 47 interns. It is a paid internship. It pays well. What is it?
They're real. It's real work. It's
real work.
It's really good stuff.
So take advantage of those types of opportunities. They're priceless. I would say for me, what's interesting is a person that's not up here with us, but that these guys also know really well. I started my first company right out of GW with a different GW alum who was a finance major and who really wanted to be an entrepreneur. And we started this company right out of college. And that's a long story that unfortunately has a sad ending because I ran it for 10 years, and 8 years in, we had 100 employees, and I laid off 80 in a day. And so it was sort of the exact opposite story of what's happened with 2U, which is part of the reason that I feel very blessed to be in this company at this moment with this great opportunity, and I really cherish it because I saw it go the exact other way, not to bring it down. But that's part of being an entrepreneur is, the failure and the risk-taking, and for me it was very real. And so I do think that a lot of that was fostered here. It's a great place. I was a political communication major, so I'd never taken a single business course, which is why now I'm enrolled in our MBA program at Chapel Hill through 2U. That's a whole other story. But I guess my point is the people are remarkable. The culture's pretty awesome. And, you just got to go out and grab the opportunities that are there for you, because in this city, there are great things for you to be able to do that will impact the rest of your life.
So
He really doesn't need the mic, as you can see.
there's two things for me. One is the education itself. So Jay-Z and I were marketing majors, and the way our classes were, there were a lot of group projects. You had to write one big paper with like 6 people in the group, and there were times that Jay-Z and I just banged the whole thing out ourselves, and they hated us and they loved us. They hated us because we weren't that nice about it, but they loved us because we got a lot of A's for the group. But we had to learn presentation skills and how to get up and how to deliver a presentation. One of the reasons to this day that I can't use Excel very well is because he knew how to do it in college. So he just did all the Excel stuff, and I couldn't. And then as an entrepreneur, so as an attorney, coming out to practice was a little different. But there's still an entrepreneurial spirit because you're building your business as an attorney. I got bad advice once from my first boss, and he said that you really shouldn't represent friends and family because it makes it too complicated as an attorney. And I decided I didn't agree with that because I figured if my friends wouldn't hire me, who would? And Mark mentioned somebody that he worked for, a company called Civic Entertainment Group. Civic Entertainment Group and Cerebellum, which was Chip's company, were my 2 biggest clients. And I was like a first or a second year at my firm. And I had a book of business because the people that I came up with believed in me. And actually a seminal moment in that, it was probably 3 months after I graduated, and Chip called and he said, we have this contract thing and we need to figure out these performance rights. And I said, okay, I'll find the attorney who knows how to do this in our firm. And he said, no, you're our attorney. Figure it out and do it. And Chip believed in me that I would be able to figure it out. He made a bet on me as a person. And that really was the beginning of a path for me to do what I do now. And so back to the entrepreneur side, originally what I said, it was very relationship based for me.
I mean, echoing a little bit what Todd's saying is we're both marketing majors, so within the days at school, we certainly spent a lot of time sitting in the dorm, sitting in the fraternity house, sitting at the bar, wherever, sort of kicking around ideas. What would be an interesting idea as a new business? And it could be something as simple as you had a great sandwich delivery idea and things that were much more grandiose than that. So there was that kind of spirit was sort of instilled from the beginning. And the very first business class we took, one of the projects you had to do was create your own business, whether it was you actually either try to do it or just write it up and sort of institute it. So from the beginning, in the very first intro to business class, entrepreneurship, I think, was part of what we were sort of trained to sort of think about. From a go-forward basis, post-graduating from GW, I've had 2 or 3 other opportunities in my career where I've worked in startup-like environments. In all of those instances, they were backed by larger firms. So it would be a startup thing that had all this financing, and none of them worked. The thing that's most interesting is then the one time I joined a true startup that didn't have this big company sort of backing this new venture. That's the one time it's worked incredibly well. So sometimes the risk-taking, the thing that's a little bit scarier, is the one that's going to work.
But you're not even giving yourself credit. So like the risk, when Jay-Z started, so our first office I sit literally in the same desk that I sat in when we started 8 years ago, and our first office is out in Landover. And we had started this thing, and we had gotten USC to agree to do our first program, University of Southern California, and the phone started ringing. And so I called Jay-Z. I was like, dude, I need some help. You want to come answer the phone? And he came and he answered the phone. And next thing you know, he's now running, a fourth of the country for the company. And I think that story is like, when I talk about he answered the phone, he answered the call, he took a risk without any clarity that it would turn into this. And so, right? I mean, that's the awesome part. And he did it for me, which was really awesome for me because I needed help answering the phone, frankly.
It's amazing to think about it. In our office out in Landover, we're 500-ish people. There was days in those early days, Chip would be up in New York in a meeting, whatever, and I'm still answering the phones. I was the only person in the entire building for 2U. Now we are 75% of the building. It's amazing to see that kind of growth from where it started.
All right, so fast forward to 2008. Tell us about the start of 2U. You've all had various paths to get there, some in education, some in real estate. How do you now get to where you start this new company? Good, the bad, and the ugly, please.
Okay.
Since you started.
The good, the bad, the ugly. Wow. Every business has a crazy story. So the first thing I would tell you is people told us we were insane. If you think about it, what's that?
How many times did they tell you that?
It really the interesting thing about great startups is I think the idea is often overvalued, and I think the execution is often overvalued. And so you think what's left? It's the execution through the maze. That's the challenge, is that it's both. It is, of course, the idea and then how you execute and how you move and shift appropriately to meet the market need, and that's hard. And there's so many reasons why great ideas don't work, and there are so many reasons why execution could ultimately win, but the only way you can really have this happen is if you get both right. And so, if you think about the basic premise, just for those that don't know the company, we partner with top universities like GW to build what we think are the world's best online degree programs. So we're not trying to power everybody's online degree. We're trying to build what we believe will be the world's best online degree programs. And one example is we have an incredible program with the School of Public Health here at GW, the Milken School, that has over 1,000 students in it. The platform that we build is not just technology. It is technology front end and back end, but we think about it as a platform with a capital P. So a variety of technology and services to allow a great university to extend its brand on a global basis and do it at the quality level that is representative of that great school, powered by weekly live classes. So our hashtag is no back row. You all know the back row, the seats closest to the exits, a refuge for minds. He wrote this, by the way, the marketing copy. So we all know the back row, a seat closest to the exits, a refuge for minds that wander, home of the unraised hand. What if you could eliminate that back row and bring every student forward? So the idea is weekly live classes online, same quality, same degree, same rights, and therefore same responsibilities. So the early days, when you look at going to USC and showing up and saying, hi, Mr. President, we would like you to take a bunch of online students you've never had before, and we need you to make them equal to the campus students, and we need you to give them the same degree and taught by the same faculty and give them the same rights and same responsibilities. And we promise we can find good ones that won't dumb down the brand, and we promise we can build a great platform even though we've never done it before. And by the way, can I have more than half your revenue, please? And that was the basic idea, and it's crazy. I mean, if you think about it. So, but they said yes, fortunately. And then Georgetown said yes, and then Chapel Hill said yes. And then we did a really smart thing, and we didn't sort of overexpand. That's all we did for a good long time. And if I tie that back to my first venture, I would tell you that that is a hard lesson learned for me. I will not take credit for everything at 2U. I will not take credit for most of what's happened at 2U. There are amazing people, like the three people that I'm so privileged to be up here with right now, that do incredible work, but I will take credit for our focus. And that is a hard lesson learned for me from my past life when I produced the PBS show, which was Cerebellum, and the show was Standard Deviance. I was the entrepreneur that loved the bright, shiny new object. I loved the, it's like a lot of you in the audience are too young to remember the first version of the movie Poltergeist, but there is a little girl and there's a little heavy-set woman who says, Carol Ann, don't go into the light. And then she goes in the light and she gets eaten, And so for me, for an entrepreneur, often the light is the bright, shiny new thing. And your DNA is sort of wired to be positive, to go for it. And so you can't help yourself. And next thing you know, you're doing way too much. So focus is probably the single most undervalued asset of a great entrepreneur. Sergey Brin can build the self-driving car because he made Google, right? That's like the best business model in human history. So you know what? They can do whatever they want at this point. But most companies will go too fast, and that was my lesson learned from my early days. So to you, we've stayed really, really focused on building the world's best online degrees. Today, fortunately, you know, it's really working. So we're up to partnerships with GW, Yale, Northwestern, Berkeley, Syracuse. They're all great schools. And we just passed, this is a pretty cool number, we just passed $1 billion in tuition bookings generated for our schools. So, you know, it's a pretty big number. So today, the notion of whether or not online education can be as good or better than the campus, which is why, Lex, I love that you gave us that little plug that it's better.
It is.
We think we're really proving that. We think this little idea that started in Landover is turning into probably one of the more important companies in all of higher education. 20 years from now at the graduate level, I think it's reasonable to argue that all of the campus programs will exist, but they'll be luxury goods. Why? It's a great life if you can afford to quit your job, pick up your life, and move and live on campus, but that is not what most of the world can do. So we think, you know, you go out 20 years, and this will have a pretty big impact on higher ed overall.
So I would add one. I'll give one ugly. Chip, how many red eyes the first year were you on?
Oh my God!
How many?
Just to be clear, I red-eyed in this morning from San Francisco at an investor conference. Year one was Jay-Z was answering the phone, as he said, and I would go to USC all the time. Was our first client. I took 32 red eyes in a year.
52 weeks in a year, 32 red eyes, and how many in a week? Do you have any idea what your max in a week was?
I think I only did 2.
So that's a red eye over more than every other week. And the reason I mention that is for an entrepreneur group, when Chip talks about drive, and so this will be me plugging the boss, but I talk to him, daily through a lot of that. That drive it's hard work, and you get it. Part of the reason you get it is because you know what you're doing, and part of it is talent, and part of it is you have a good idea, and then part of it is you make it work because you work really hard for not a lot at some times because of a vision and what you're looking to achieve, with nobody patting you on the back and a lot of people telling you that you'll fail, or a lot of people telling you that your idea isn't good. But there is somebody who drives it and is willing to work exceptionally hard. And I think that is something that you have to know as an entrepreneur early on. Is it's hard, and you have to persevere in light of all the things that need to go right. One of those things that none of it will go right is if you're not willing to do the hard work. And above all, everybody, he did the hard work, and that's just a fact. And that's a fact. So that would be my biggest, like, the piece of the ugly that you didn't give. That to me is, I don't even know if it's ugly, but I mean, it might, like, while you're doing it, sometimes it's ugly because it's hard. So that's what I would add to that.
JC, you were there at the beginning. Anything you want to add?
Maybe just a case study in career switching and risk taking. So as you referenced, I'd been almost 20 years of my career solely in real estate, and primarily real estate development, real estate finance. That was my world. 2007, 2008, that was a terrible world to be in. That's literally the world fell apart. So to have a conversation with Chip about the new company that was starting, it struck me immediately that it was super interesting and super smart, and something that was, in some ways incredibly obvious, and while not necessarily obvious to the folks at USC initially, but eventually it was obvious to me. So, given the opportunity, it was a great thing to try, but it was also super scary. You spent this many years doing one thing, and now you're going to try to do something different in a startup and without a safety net. But you sort of spend the time and you dig in and you do it. And then I went up for the next 8 years doing something I've never done before. And this first year or so was really new. I mean, I spent time answering the phone, acting as an admissions counselor, talking to students about this thing that was sort of new and nebulous, but then hiring a bunch of people to do that work with me or for me. I'd never hired 30 people in a year before. I'd hired 2, and both of them, were MBAs from the University of Chicago at the time. That's so very different type of velocity and types of skills, and then building out a level of an organization that included a whole team of people that were doing missions counseling, and then a whole team of people that were putting applications together. Things I'd never even heard of, thought of about before, but you just sort of dig in and you have to do it and you sort of figure it out. So, this is where I put the plug to GW. You learn to think, right? So, I had a bunch of technical training to do one thing, but I had a bunch of sort of more broad training to learn how to think, to solve problems and work with people and develop a bunch of new processes and strategies I'd never done before. So that was, and mixed in with all that, it was really good. And at times, it was really bad. And in a couple of moments, it got really ugly. But overall, at the end of the day, it worked out amazingly well, and it allowed me to grow in pretty unique ways.
Let me ask you guys now to tell us about the culture of the current company. What's it like to work at 2U? What's the average day?
Yeah, well, I wanted to jump in a second ago and kind of address that. So in the year one, 32 red eyes. Jay-Z's answering the phone, but he's answering the phone and doing things sort of all day, all night, every day, right? So there's just an intense amount of work that has to go into a startup like this. But at the same time, they were able to establish in those very, very early days a really phenomenal culture where people would be willing to do whatever it took and work as hard as they needed to accomplish something. But they did really amazing things like, let's really celebrate our success. Let's implement things like we have a no asshole policy. And if we're going to be spending all of these hours together and flying on red eyes together, I really need that person to be someone that I trust and that I love and that I want to spend time with, because it's super important. And one of the great things about the company today, where we're now over 1,000 people, is that's really translated. That's really grown, where it's not super hard to have a great culture with 10 people, right? Because you know everybody and you're handpicking everybody and you can set everything. It's really hard to do it at the scale that we're at now, but it's translated and it's really special. And you hear 32 red eyes and all-nighters and work. The idea of work-life balance is like, how does that work? And work-life balance isn't about necessarily working from 9 to 5. It's about making sure that you're spending time on things that are worthwhile and valuable to you, and celebrating moments and being with your family and celebrating important occasions, being together at the right moments and having a balance in that way. And it's something that's really carried on since 2008.
I think that so I came from a law firm environment, and culture there is I would have said culture is non-existent, but the fact is there was a culture, and it was terrible. It was very bottom line driven, very money for the partners driven, and that employees are all interchangeable. And I think that a lot of people there were drones, and they just came in, and when that really hit them in a negative way, it was funny to watch them try to change the culture. There's this, they decided to put fruit out on Fridays, and that was going to be like, that's our big culture change. We're going to have a plate of fruit. And then there was an email from the woman who was in charge of the whole thing saying, reminding everybody to only take one piece. And so for me, I didn't understand what culture really meant until I saw one that was very carefully crafted. And then another piece of it for me also was I went to a meeting in our New York office. It had to do with data integrity and data security. And the place I came from, you had to do everything yourself or watch everything or it wasn't done right. And you had to live with it. And I went to this meeting, and for me, in my mind, it was like a kickoff where to figure out how it was going to work and how everybody would do it. And I went into this meeting, and 10 different people sat down, and they all pulled up a bunch of stuff they had been working on that very topic for over a year. And it had stunned me that the culture of a place was people who really owned what they were going to be doing. And already had it and were going with it. And that was that moment where I learned what culture meant is people that you want to work with and you want to be around, but also people who care about results and what they do. And we talk about thinking outside of the box. That's a lot of what we do is figure stuff out, whether it's in your job description or not, but how's it going to fit into the rest of the business? And how do you go and help somebody else in what they're doing because it ties to something that affects you or that you know something about. And when everybody's really receptive to that, when you reach out to somebody with an email saying, I saw this and thought of you, it has nothing to do, it's not in your email to say it has nothing to do with what I do, but I know it has something to do with what you do, and it might help you. And when people do that together, that to me is the essence of how culture also drives results.
Chip, I know you're the CEO of a publicly traded company and there are restrictions on what you can say, but can you give us a sense of what's hot and what's not at 2U now? Where are you guys headed? What should we look for from you?
Well, we just had our Q4 earnings call last Thursday, and so it's actually good timing because I have a lot that I can talk about without getting us in trouble with this guy. So that is his job, is to keep me out of trouble, one of his many. He does that well. So the company's doing great. We last year we've now had 8 consecutive beat and raises, which is the way the street works. Is they want you to sort of up your game each quarter. It's been a fascinating journey for me personally to be a public company CEO. It's every day I learn something new. Very comfortable today telling you that I don't know everything and I learn every day, and comfortable with sort of at this stage in my career knowing what I know and knowing what I don't know. And I'd say my biggest recommendation to the young entrepreneurs out there is to be very comfortable in your own skin, and don't try to act like you know everything, because you don't, and take a lot of great advice and be comfortable ignoring it when you need to and go your own path. But if you don't take that advice, you won't improve. Bring people in that could be your boss every time. All 3 of these guys are fantastic, and there are people all over the executive team that are like that. And always hire up. Always, always, always. Never worry about you. Every time you hire up, you will get better without question. It's hard to do at times because it makes you vulnerable in your own mind, but there's no doubt that you improve the company when you do so. So, fortunately, 2U is, it's sort of 8-year overnight success. What's kind of interesting about the company is because we're not a consumer brand, people don't know the business really well. We're a remarkably under the radar company for being 1,000 employees, but we're kind of hitting our stride right now. So we've recently guided that we will significantly increase the number of programs that we build. So we had historically done 4 programs per year, and the reason for that is each program is a $10 million net negative cash over the first 4 years of that program's life. So they're all expensive, is my point, because doing it this way is non-trivial. So we increased the number we will do from 4 to 6 per year this year, 9 next year, and at least 12 in 2018. So the pace is picking up, and the reason for that...
We have to hire a lot more people.
Yeah, that's right. By the way, Inez, raise your hand. So Inez is not only one of our recruiters, but is a GW alum. Go Colonial. And we have how many open jobs right now? 72 open positions. So she's your gal if you're looking for a job. Please, we need great people. And there's probably right now, out of the 1,000 employees, I'd bet there's 70 GW alums, something like that. More? Ton of GW alums. So Lex, the company is really in some ways fulfilling the promise that the original idea. What's kind of crazy about 2U is we've never pivoted. It's been the same core idea, and I feel very blessed to be running a company that, it's pretty rare to have a company have revenue growth rate go up once you pass $100 million. That's pretty rare. You can kind of name them. And so we think we have an opportunity to turn this business into a global, iconic, long-term company. We've promised 30+% growth for the foreseeable future. So financially, I do not go to bed at night terrified of that. We actually feel very comfortable with that promise to the street. And we've been able to maintain the culture. And I would argue, my job as CEO is, I don't have that many constituencies. I have our university partners, students in our programs, faculty in our programs, and employees. I don't list investors on that list. If I do right by the other 4, all will be fine. If we ever forget the long-term correlation between our financial success and student outcomes, that is really what the company is built on. But you get there by having unbelievable people. And so you'd be shocked actually, I spend a remarkable amount of my time on the culture of the business. Now, sitting up here, I worry a little bit when you're talking about 2U. You're hearing from 3 of my best friends who happen to be senior executives at a company that they've worked their ass off for and that they've killed for. So we could all sit here and pat ourselves on the back. We're not perfect. The company is not perfect. Every company has flaws. But I do believe that it is 1,000 people aligned in a core mission that don't let the skeptic win, sort of no is easy, yes is hard. They cherish the opportunity. They take risks. And, because of that, you can accomplish a lot if you get 1,000 great people aligned. One little nugget, just culture-wise, of the kind of cool stuff that happens. We do this crazy thing in the Maryland office called spontaneous dance parties. You have to see it to believe it, but it's true. They happen, and it's a rager for like a half hour, unannounced.
There's a disco ball above his desk.
So they're, and what's important is not that not every person wants to dance, but the feeling in the room, even from the people that are just wanting to watch the people that are dancing, is pretty remarkable, and it says a lot about the spirit of the people.
One other point on sort of culture. So you're hearing from us, right? So 4 guys who were friends because we came to school here, and that's part of the story we're telling. The rest of the executive team actually doesn't look like the 4 of us. There are some people that are different. We have some people who might have a different gender, maybe a different skin color, maybe a different background. So this is our story, and yes, we're friends, but we don't all look exactly like this.
To use an incredibly diverse place. It's not all a bunch of guys that went to GW.
92.
Yeah. So we've only got a few minutes left, and I want to leave some time for questions. But we're at the Startup Career Fair. We'd be remiss if we didn't ask you guys for some specifics about what you look for in a candidate. So somebody who wants to come and dance at 2U, what are you looking for in a resume or in their Facebook page, or what? How does somebody fit?
I'm going to
in
let
2U?
these guys address that. The one thing I will say is hire people that brighten the room every time. So Todd mentioned it earlier, look for the person. Skill set is trainable. You'd, of course, love to have somebody with great skill set, but if you can bring in those people that brighten every room they go into, I know that sounds cheesy. It is 100% true. The company will be better because of it. So,
What do I look for? Well, you're always looking for good people and you're looking for skill set, but I guess what I would say is I want to know the person in front of me when I'm trying to hire. Like I tell people, especially when people are changing jobs from a job that they like, I tell somebody, look, if you come here and it doesn't work out, it's a disaster for you and it's a disaster for me. So it fails on both ends if it doesn't work. You've uprooted your life and maybe a job that you were happy in, and then you don't have that anymore. And then I've spent the recruiting process, and it takes a while to get to know that somebody isn't working. And then I have to go through that process again, and I've lost that time. And we move fast, and we do a lot of work. And so that's a disaster. So for me, the most important thing is being honest with who you are and showing that to me when I'm interviewing you. And when one of the things I say is I don't look over your shoulder. In my department, we only have 3 lawyers running a 1,000-person company, so you get a lot of autonomy. We don't have time to watch every little thing the other person does. And so when I say something like, it's going to be your responsibility to build this part of our business, and you'll report to me, but I'm not going to oversee everything you do, to be honest with yourself. Some people like more rigidity. Is that a word? Rigidity? Sure. More rigidness. Some people like that, and it's really easy to say, oh, I'm totally the person who is self-motivated and self-driven. And some people aren't, and that's okay. But you have to be listening. When I'm looking for honesty and what's going to work, be honest with who you are and show yourself to me as the person who's looking to hire you so I can figure out whether or not it's going to work. Because when it doesn't work, it's bad for both sides, it's not just bad for me.
I think a diversity of background within somebody's past, whether resume or experiences, is really important. It shows a curiosity, an intellectual curiosity to try lots of different things and to be exploratory with their own career, with their own things that they want to do is important. And then what that ultimately gets to in terms of skill set that I find really important, I mentioned earlier, is sort of it shows to me that you're sort of critical thinking. You know how to think, you know how to problem solve, you know how to work through issues, even as you're building your own background in your own portfolio. And part of that, and maybe this is not necessarily true coming right out of school a couple of years from now, a lot of folks are scared of the job hopping. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. If it's not working and you want to move to something else that's more interesting, that's okay. And I think a smart employer will see that sort of come through, that you're sort of advancing and working through your career. So don't sort of be afraid, again, to sort of, take risks and build out that broad base of experience. Swimming straight in one lane can at some point in time be limiting. So don't sort of get trapped because of the place you're going to go. They're going to probably expect lots of different skill sets from you. So I think that's part of what you should be thinking about at this point in your careers.
Yeah, I mean, I have a fairly large group that I have to recruit for, and on the more experienced side, I definitively agree with Jay-Z. I like to see some diversity of experience. I recently hired a vice president level person, and I interviewed tons of people, and a lot of the folks who had great experience, really good brands, but maybe they've been in that same role for 15 or 20 years. I like the person who's been in some different kinds of industries, different types of companies, different kinds of brands. For my world, it's super helpful. On the less experienced, more junior side, I could care less. I mean, look, I'm a history major, so right, I don't care what you've studied at even a little. I need people who can write, a coherent sentence. And to Chip's point of brightening the room, one of my group has to work with our school partners every day, and so I need to put someone in front of all these great universities that they're going to respect and they're going to really be impressed by, and that they're going to like talking to. So I need that sort of intangible of who they are. And again, for the junior folks, I like to see what you've done in school, what internship, what work. I like to have seen that you've done something other than simply studied, because I know you're going to come in, with some skills and be able to function in a team environment.
Fantastic. So we have about 5 minutes left by my watch. I'd like to get some questions from the audience. Hey, Jasmine, could you take this microphone and so we can be sure to record the questions? I want to get them on the videotape.
I'll try to talk loud too. Todd, you talked about creating or crafting the culture. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What steps you took Can you talk a little bit more about crafting the culture and what steps you guys started off early in your startup career trying to do to craft that culture?
Yes, but I'm going to let Chip answer that, because that actually isn't me in terms of the early. My culture was law firm environment. So I kind of got a lesson in the culture I didn't want, which is to treat people as interchangeable commodities and not spend time with them, not really mentor, and to just be, work, output. Because in a law firm, it's hours, and that's what your product is.
I think you can be really purposeful with your culture, to the point where when I was writing our culture code down, there were moments where I felt a little cheesy, where I was, be bold and fearless, and you feel like, am I really writing? Well, yeah, no, that's real. What does that mean? That means don't do it the way I did it. Find a better way to do it. Take the risk to do something innovative. And so we were really particular about it. We actually wrote it down, and then I think manicuring it over time. We do, just one example, we do an annual company meeting. I will do the annual company meeting as long as I am CEO of this company, even if we have 10,000 employees. I think it is hugely valuable. We fly everybody in from every office, Hong Kong, Denver, LA, everywhere. This year it's at Disney, and it's 2 days. And one of our partners, the chancellor of Syracuse, was our keynote a couple of years ago. And he said, this is like a combination of a business meeting and a religious revival. And I was like, yeah, it is. It's a great description. So why do we do it? Because you got to cherish the wins, you got to enjoy the successes, and you have to make sure people understand that they're part of something bigger. Everybody wants to be part of something bigger. So I spend a lot of time trying to figure out ways to step up our game. So something that we came up with 2 years ago that's been a big new hit is Take Your Parents to Work Day. So a lot of companies do Take Your Kids to Work Day. And we came up with this idea of, people bringing their parents to work. And so this past year, we had, 100 parents flying in from all over the country to come learn about the company. And it was so positive for not just those parents, but more importantly for all the employees to be able to, expose what they do every day to their folks.
It's also, having culture statements, elements of your culture that tie back to what you do as a business, right? So we have culture, Parts of our
Very
culture
good
are
point.
about recruiting people. They're about retaining people. They're about delivering outcomes for our students, or telling, Wall Street, doing what we tell them we're going to do, or delivering for our partners. And so it's not in a vacuum, right? It's not a culture because we like to have fun, which, yeah, of course we do. But it helps make the business better too.
And one of the 8 codes is have fun. It's totally relevant. Like, life's too short.
Let's get at least one more question.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. My name is here. My name is Andres. I'm interested in your competitors. The education online market is growing so fast. So, what do you think distinguish to you from your competitors in terms of your value proposition and so on? Thanks.
So most of the competitive landscape is filled with companies that are trying to aggregate as many degree programs as possible and provide what I would argue is a more vanilla layer of technology and service, allowing a school to go online. And I'd sum it up as one of my partners said this to me after he signed. We were out celebrating the signing of the contract, and one of the deans said to me, hey, I checked out competitor blank extensively, and I was pretty impressed. And I was like, oh, I didn't know. I had no idea he had done it. And he said, yeah, I checked them out, and they convinced me that that they could make me that they could bring me online, and I believed them. They were pretty good. You came in and told me you could make me great in the 21st century. What would you buy? And I was like, that's the guy, right? So that's what we're trying to do. We are really trying to build something great, long-term, sustainable, and scalable. And most folks aren't doing that. So there's now, because we've had a lot of success, we joke about 3U, 4U, and 5U. They're all coming. Venture capital, that is what venture capital does. So we can certainly not rest on our laurels. We have to continue to step up our game. And that comes back to the culture, is hiring those great people that will continue to bring in that new energy, new thinking, and advance the cause of making sure that the future program is better than a program that we might have launched 2 years ago, and then continue to make the programs we've launched better and better over time, because we have 10 to 15-year partnerships.
We have time for one more. Let's get Megan.
And we're actually going to stay after so we can talk. We have to go to lunch. And then later, we're going to the Lion, by the way.
Last question, Megan.
Thank you. Hi, guys. My name is Megan McGrath. I'm a part-time MBA, and I actually work at the law school. My question for you is, you said earlier something that I thought was really interesting. You said that you had to protect your focus as opposed to scaling so quickly. And one of the things that we've heard in a lot of our classes is when you have these investors, you have to be able to demonstrate growth. So how did you preserve the integrity of what you were trying to do instead of feeling like you were pushed by the bottom line?
It's starting a company and raising venture capital is tricky. We did raise, Lex was right, we raised $102 million of venture capital because our model is very capital intensive. And we looked for the partners that thought longer term. So some of it was making sure that we brought in investors that understood that this was a long-term play. And then you got to stick to your guns. When I said be comfortable bringing in advice and sort of taking advice externally, but at the same time also being comfortable ignoring it when you need to. The reason that's such an important thing is you don't know everything, so you need to be able to bring in external thought. And at the same time, there are just moments where you just got to stick with your gut and you got to stay on it. And we had people coming to us all over the place to do 2U for K-12 and 2U for this and 2U for that. And there was one moment, these guys will all laugh because they know our current COO has been at the company the whole time. He's great. And, Rob is very different than me. If I paint in bright colors, he's more brass tacks. And there was one moment where the VA came to us and said that they were interested in us helping them figure out how to do workforce development, and it was $1 billion contract. And we were only 3 years into our journey at that point. And when Rob heard $1 billion, Rob was like Dr. Evil, a little bit like $1 billion. So that was the one moment of temptation where we actually we did entertain it, but not very long. And I think some of that is just a really hard lesson for me. When that first company I loved, we didn't talk about it much, but the number of GW connections in that first one is crazy. So it was a PBS show, Standard Deviants, with middle school, high school, college courses taught by comedians and actors, the vast majority of whom were from GW because that's where I went. So Mike Birbiglia was in the show. TJ Miller from Silicon Valley was in the show. Kerry Washington, that was her first show. So ton of GW connections. And why did that company fail? Lack of focus for me. I just did way too much. At one point, we had licensed one of PBS's DirecTV channels. I mean, what were we doing? You know, so sticking to our guns came a little bit out of the fact that, you know, my first one, it's not like I didn't put effort in. It's not like I didn't work hard. I did it for 8 years, and 8 years in, I laid off 80. I put 80 people in one room, 20 people in the other, and laid off the 80. Mark was with me at that company. It was pretty brutal, you know, and so you go through that. If it doesn't change you, if it doesn't change you, you have no heart, soul, or brain, right? So for me, that really emboldened me to make sure that in this particular case, we had a great idea, stick with it. And we really haven't lost that focus since.
The one thing I would add, someone's wallet's on the floor there, and it's driving me nuts.
See, look at the general counsel right there, protecting everybody.
The one thing I would add to that, and this is me watching Chip as the boss, and the one with the vision, is when something's not working, you got to bail out. Don't stick to it because you thought it was a good idea. You know,
That's a really good point.
He'll cut bait on something that he might have championed that was his idea. The minute it's not working, he doesn't wait. In any big or small, doesn't work. Move
Well, I
on.
think, you know what, really, for a startup in the room, take the risk and do your best to not make the same mistake twice. That's the magic. Because if you don't take the risk, you'll never make it happen. The more you can sort of focus, and then if you make the mistake, get over it and move on.
With that, we come to the end of our time. Let's thank you. Round of applause. Thank you to our panelists.